Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm Rabbi Leo Berkowitz. This is our cantorial soloist, Rebecca Schwartz, and we are happy to welcome you here to Kol Ami to celebrate Shabbat. I'm getting over a cold, which is not COVID, but I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to keep this on so as not to share my germs. I see we have more masked people. We're watching things sort of undulate in that way. I always say that one of the things that I think makes me that makes me most Jewish is that I can consider multiple places home. So I last week was in North Carolina with my first congregation, and it felt like I hadn't been there in 10 years, and it felt like I was coming home. And then this week, it also feels nice to be home and to be coming back here. And it feels really good. This is our new home, but it feels really good to see the chairs starting to fill. And Carol, you've got quite a crowd online as well. It's really nice to see everybody back. Today, after I'd actually finished preparing Torah study, I came across this teaching by a colleague. This is the week where Joseph's brothers throw him in a pit. Which, if you're interested in that, definitely come to Torah study tomorrow. And this is what Rabbi Heather Miller had to say about this experience. Joseph looked like a goner. He was supposed to be murdered, but then out of nowhere, Reuben provided a small opening. Maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to actually actively kill him. The opening allowed Joseph to live a few more hours until Judah was able to convince the brothers to sell him off to the Ishmaelites instead of forsaking him in a pit. What we learn from this is that even when we are in our darkest hour, even when we think we are done for, all it takes is one small act to give us a chance. One small pinhole shining light through the seal of darkness of despair can change everything. And that in turn can lead to another saving grace and another. Eventually we may rise up from the deepest, darkest pit. In the Midrash, the rabbis liken Joseph to the Jewish people. And thus Joseph becomes a symbol for each of us. If we can just hold on for another hour, we may be able to see our way out of the darkness and into the glory of our destiny. We're going to continue our service on page 121. Nadine, would you like to light candles tonight? Surprise! You want to come up here and read one of these first? Okay.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Page 142.
Shalom Aleichem,
38.
We turn to page 261. Holy One, give me a quiet heart and help me to hear the still small voice that speaks within me. It calls me to come close to you and to grow in your likeness. It teaches me to do my work faithfully, even when no one's eye is upon me. It counsels me to judge others kindly and to love them freely, for it persuades me to see divinity in everyone I meet. Help me, O God, to come to the end of each day, feeling that I used its gifts wisely and faced its trials bravely. Page 264, we rise in body and in spirit for the Baruch Hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, bechokma poteach she'arim, uvitvuna meshane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umesader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. Uma'avir yom umevi laila, umavdil bein yom uvein laila. Adonai Tzivaot Shemo, El Chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. In each age we transmit and receive Torah. At each moment we are addressed by the world. In each age, we are challenged by our ancient teaching. At each moment, we stand face to face with truth. In each age, we add our wisdom to that which has gone before. At each moment, the knowing heart is filled with wonder. In each age, the children of Torah become its builders and seek to set the world firm on a foundation of truth. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Amen. You may be seated. וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, Adonai Elohim. Amen. Page 269, we pray responsively. We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all, yet that oneness eludes our grasp as imperfection and evil abound. Before our eyes, there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness. There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul. When will redemption come? When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves. Long ago, we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High. We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom.
From life's storms, let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Achievenu, Adonai Eloheinu. From life's storms.
Page 272. Page 273, we rise in body and in spirit for the tefillah.
למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע מגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם, בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד השם, מחבר חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נפלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לישני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומך מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. רחמנת על החיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בך יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. Page 278. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Page 280.
Adonai Elohim.
For the good in us which calls us to a better life, we give thanks. For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and our hands, we offer praise. For the desire in us which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful. For life and nature, harmony and beauty, for the hope of tomorrow, all praise to the source of being.
Baruch atah Adonai, atah Shimcha, ulecha na'el lehodot. Shalom Yisrael Amecha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Yisrael Amecha Tasim Le'olam. Yatahu Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom. Yatahu Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom. Shalom Yisrael Amecha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Yisrael Amecha Tasim Le'olam. B'tov be'enecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'kol עת ובכל שעה בזמנך. Shalom Yisrael Amecha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Yisrael Amecha Tasim Le'olam. Baruch atah Adonai, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Please take a moment for silent prayer.
Shalom, shalom, b'Tawah, u'ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Oseh shalom, shalom, b'Rama, u'ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Shalom
pause in the heart of our service to offer a prayer for those in our community who are ill. If there's a name you'd like to share for a blessing of healing, please share it in the room or in the chat.
Alan Cohen, John Campbell, Ajax Diane, Susan Silverstein.
Eddie Madigan, Hannah Brenner,
Francisco Miranda and Grace Peroso. Chuck Katz and Lynn Katz. Kento, Carlton Sinclair. Andrea Duke.
You're also thinking of, one second. Amy Goldberg Alberts, John Sherman, Isaac Katz, Sheila and Matthew Sadaloff, Lauren Green, Frank Russo, Aviva Kay, Evelyn Haas, Heather Roberts, Bob Wolfson, Georgie Clymer, as well as David Harrison, Barry Cohen, Joe Crinty, Rita Siegel, Stephen Witt, Jerry Klebanoff, and Margie Jacobs. We hold all of these names in our hearts as we join in a prayer of healing together on page 371. And just as we share that which is difficult, we also share that which is joyful. If anybody has a simcha to share, a birthday, an anniversary, something wonderful happening to your children or grandchildren or at school, no joy is too small. Yes, Rebecca.
My mom celebrated her 91st birthday.
Oh, wow. Admei ve'esrim, 120 years worth of joy and good health. All right. What else are we celebrating? Yes, Ria.
We're celebrating Hanukkah in my house. There are toys all over the place. Children just can't wait until Sunday night.
Yes, Hanukkah begins on Sunday night, which is a very wonderful and exciting thing. And I actually spent this morning, how many of you follow us on Facebook? Not that many actually. So I spent this morning posting a few Hanukkah treats on our Facebook page that'll pop up each night of Hanukkah. So if you are on Facebook, but you don't usually look at us, this week would be a fun week. There's a lot of little musical and theatrical treats happening there. Somebody shared with me, I think it was Alan Wolster actually sent me one a cappella group did a medley called Elton Jonica. It was actually really good. I don't always like their medleys, and that one was good.
It was 6:13.
Yeah, 6:13. All right. Oh, and I just want, do we have other joys we want to share? I wanted to share that last week I wasn't here because I was at a bar mitzvah in North Carolina. And I held the bar mitzvah boy when he was a baby, like the day he was born. I happened to be in the hospital visiting congregants, and I got to hold him. And he obviously didn't remember that and wasn't as excited as I was, but I got to offer him a blessing on his bar mitzvah, which was always a dream of mine, to be able to follow somebody through that far. Okay, any other simchas? Okay. So we have a tag talk tonight, so no sermon. Yay. We're going to continue with Aleinu. Abby, do you want to come up and open the ark for us? We're on page 586. You don't have to, but we'd love your help. And we invite everyone to rise. Of course. Good job. Okay, so you're going to open the doors. I like your shirt. Okay, so now I'm going to pull the string. This one. Pull down. Overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hands but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. You may be seated. Page 593. The light of life is a finite flame. Like the Shabbat candles, life is kindled. It burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty, but soon it fades, its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen. The flames dance and our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more and are no more seen. And yet we do not despair, for we are more than a memory slowly fading into the darkness. With our lives we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. This week, we mourn the recent passings of Robert C. Baker, brother of Patty Ann Long and uncle of Benjamin Long, Emmanuel Cohn, great-grandfather of Lucy Kohler, Leon M. Rosenson, stepfather of Michael Levin, Marjorie Ruger, wife of Lawrence Ruger, Rebecca Sender, mother of Jessica and Matthew Sender, and Doug N. Tischler, cousin of Carol and Stephen Witt. We are also observing the yard sites of Ty Appel, brother of Guy Appel, Carol Barron, beloved member of our congregation, Donald Beck, father of Michelle Steinbrecker, Paula Clarkson, wife of Michael Shapiro, Clara Cohen, grandmother of Merrill Germankin, Bernard Friedman, uncle of Shelley Chamberlain, Irv Greenberg, husband of Joan Greenberg, Flora Harrison, mother of David Harrison, Yetta Kaplan, grandmother of Mark Kaplan, Daniel Langman, son of Charles and Lori Jubileer Langman, Benjamin Longer, father of Rhea Applebaum, Mo Mazer, father of Carrie Mazer, Joey McKelvey, nephew of Michael Chernoff, Byron Schaefer, beloved member of our congregation, Albert Seidman, father of Martin Seidman, Jonathan Scott Warsaw, brother of Jeffrey Warsaw, and Harold Witt, uncle of Carol and Stephen Witt. If there's a name you'd like to add to this list, please do so now. We add to that list Connor Owens. This mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 598, and we rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divarach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chaye chon v'yomei chon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach ve'olam u'amei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei dekudesha, brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran ve'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us say, Amen. Seated. I seem to have missed one of the happy occasions, which is one I should know because I was there. Nancy and Russell are celebrating their 3rd wedding anniversary. So we'll make a l'chaim to them as we say Kiddush, which is on page 123.
Mitzrayim.
got bigger.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz
So I'm just going to make a few announcements and then we'll conclude the service part of our service and then we'll invite Carol up to speak to us. Linda, are you introducing Carol today or am I? Oh, I could do it. Okay. All right. And I just want to let everybody know Sunday's the first night of Hanukkah. We will be celebrating Hanukkah as a congregation on the 23rd at 7 p.m. We're going to do a little bit earlier. We've invited our Kolami Religious School alumni. So basically anyone who is either back visiting or who has or who still lives in Philadelphia is welcome to come back. And I believe there are going to be jelly donuts for everyone. So we hope that you will join us for that evening. If you are in town and that you will bring your young folks if they are also in town. And also the Interfaith Relationship Dialogue Group has been going to see a play called Ancient History that is being performed in various places throughout the area. And there's a performance tomorrow night and a performance Sunday. And we're actually going to have an opportunity to speak with the director sometime in January. It's still being ironed out, but this weekend is your last chance. Some of you already saw it, right? I know Mom and Larry already saw it. Did anyone else see it yet? Anyway, it's a play about an interfaith relationship, and it's a wonderful opportunity. So it's called Ancient History. The theater is Theater Ariel. You can go either tomorrow night or Sunday afternoon, and I believe it's in Wynwood. Okay, what shall we sing? It's a transitional song.
Page 625.
Blessed were you when you came into the house of God. Blessed may you be as you go forth. We are grateful to be able to come together and to draw from each other's light and warmth. Help us to draw light and warmth from the holiday of Hanukkah, to celebrate life's miracles, large and small, and to go forward into the new year in good health and in happiness. And let us say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Hey, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
I'm just gonna hit record before I introduce. Okay. It's funny that Nancy and Russell's wedding should come up because I think that is the first time I heard this story. I sat with Carol and Ira at Nancy and Russell's wedding, and I don't even know how it came up, but Carol let me know that she is one of the reasons that there are regulations on baby formula, which was shocking on multiple levels. First, that there were no regulations on baby formula before. And second, that Carol was so instrumental in making sure that there was safe formula for her child and also for all children. So she started a nonprofit organization with the goal of monitoring thousands of babies on defective formula, then pushing Congress to pass a law giving the FDA the authority to regulate baby formula. And I am delighted to welcome her to the Bima to share her story with us. Use the microphone. Okay. Thanks. And if you want to see, I'll move this a little bit.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. I'm Carol Laskin. I have been a happy member of Kolami for about 7.5 years. I grew up here, graduated from high school here, and then left the area for about 50 years. Most of my adult life I spent in the Washington metropolitan area. I was a healthcare consultant, and my mother always said, "What does that mean?" And what I did was I worked with large pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies and helped them on projects. And I also worked with the Department of Health and Human Services. The reason I want to share my story with you today is to give you hope that sometimes ordinary people can actually create a positive change in society. And I hope that's what you take from my talk. My story starts with the birth of my oldest son, Ben, which was in October 1978. We had allergies in our family, and so Ben was put on a soy-based formula, which was called Neomol Soy, was made by Syntex. The formula is no longer made, and the company is no longer in existence, fortunately. When Ben was 6 months old, I took him for his regular checkup, and he had lost a half a pound. And babies are not supposed to lose weight, they're supposed to gain weight. The doctor said to me, "Come back in another month and I want to weigh Ben again." I brought him back at 7 months and he had lost another half a pound. So he was deemed a failure to thrive child. And at that point, the doctor took a lot of blood tests. About 2 days later at dinner time, I got one of those calls that will forever be in my memory. The doctor said to me, "I have Ben's results. They are the most abnormal test results I have ever seen in my life," which is not what you want to hear about your child in any way. And what he said to me was, "I've been talking to a pediatric nephrologist at Children's Hospital in DC, which is where we were living, and a nephrologist is a kidney doctor, and he thinks Ben has a very rare kidney disorder called Bartter syndrome. I've made an appointment for you. I want you to go see him." So a couple of days later, Ben's dad and I took Ben to the hospital, and he ended up being hospitalized for about 2 days, where they took a lot of blood tests to try and figure out what was going on with him. Because he was failure to thrive, they brought in a nutritionist, and the nutritionist said to us, "He's on a soy-based formula. I want to switch him to a milk-based formula because the calories are more accessible to a baby from a milk-based formula to a soy formula rather than a soy formula." And there was a discussion about whether we should do it or not do it, because there was a question of if Ben was going to have an allergy to it and what was going to happen. So we finally decided that we were going to do it. And what did happen was Ben started to drink the formula, which he had refused before, And within 2 or 3 weeks, he had gained back all of the weight that he had lost. And his blood values, which had been incredibly abnormal, started to edge towards normalcy. So Ben had been in the hospital for about 2 weeks. For about 2 days. After everything kind of calmed down for us, I decided I was going to call the FDA because I wanted to see if there was a problem with the formula, given that the only medical intervention that Ben had was a change in formula. So I called the FDA and told them about Ben's experience and the change of formula and how he had started gaining weight and how his blood values were returning to normal. And I asked if there were any problems that had been reported about neomolsoy, and they said no. It had been on the market for many years and there weren't any problems that were reported. And then I asked the question that forever changed my life. I said, how do you regulate baby formula? And the FDI official said to me, well, we've been trying to get the power to regulate baby formula from Congress for years. We don't have it. So everything to do with the production of baby formula and regulation of baby formula is voluntary, not mandatory, but voluntary. And I said to him, so how do I know baby formula is safe? What are you doing about that? And he said to me, we use GMP, which is good manufacturing practice, which means that you have to create or produce the product, the formula, in a clean environment. And the label of the can has to reflect what is actually in the can. At which point I said, are you telling me that if I have a clean kitchen and I decide that I'm going to put peanut butter and ingredients in a can of formula and label it that it has peanut butter in it, I can sell this? And he said, yes. And I said, no way, this is not possible. And then I said to him, I am going to get you the power to regulate baby formula. This is unacceptable. At which point he hung up on me because he thought I was a crazy person, which I agreed I would probably have done the same thing. So then we take a little detour to a doctor in Memphis, Tennessee, who was a pediatric nephrologist and had been in practice for 17 years at the local children's hospital there. In January of 1979, he saw a child who had the same symptoms as Ben. Thought, interesting. In my 17 years of practice, I've only seen one other child with Bartter syndrome. He saw another child in June 79. He saw a third child in July of 79 and said, this is statistically impossible. And he was smart enough to figure out that what they all had in common was they were all in the same baby formula, neomolsoy. So he called the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, told him what he had discovered, and CDC called all the pediatric nephrologist departments in all the children's hospital in our country and said, go back through your records and see if you find any other children over the past year who have been diagnosed with Bartter syndrome and obviously ended up in the hospital. And they came up with 29 other cases and 3 deaths. So then we kind of go forward a little bit to August 1st, 1979. That was the day that the FDA recalled neomolsoy and declared it a defective formula. Again, it was a voluntary recall. And what happened was 8 months later, I was still finding neomolsoy in stores all over the place. Neomolsoy was what the Syntex, the company that made neomolsoy, said the reason that there was a problem was that they had taken salt out of the formula in 1977. And they said it was theoretically because they wanted to make sure that there was no hypertension in babies. Salt is sodium chloride, and babies need chloride in order for proper growth and in order for proper brain development. And they had stopped testing for chloride in the formula. I have very grave doubts about the legitimacy of what they said, because in our investigations, we found children from 10 years before who had similar problems. So I didn't happen to believe what the company said. Also on that day, on August 1st, a family whose name was Lynn Pilot and Larry Pilot and Bradley Pilot ended up at the DC Children's Hospital, the same one that we had been in, and had the same pediatric nephrologist. He was having the same symptoms that Ben had. He had been sicker for longer. This was Lynn's and Larry's third child. They had taken him to numerous doctors and said, there's something the matter with my child, and nobody would believe them. They finally were able to get admitted to the hospital again on August 1st. At that point, Bradley was in really bad shape. He was extremely dehydrated. His heart was not functioning well, and he ended up in the hospital for 7 days. Lynn asked the pediatric nephrologist that we had in common lots of questions, and the pediatric nephrologist said to him, I had a mother just like you. She drove me crazy. She asked me a lot of questions, which would have been me. And Lynn said, I want her name. I want to talk to her. And there was no HIPAA at that point. So the doctor said, okay, here's her name and her phone number. And when Lynn and Bradley and Larry got home and life was calmer for them, Lynn called me. And what she told me afterwards is she called me basically to see if Ben was alive, because she was afraid he had died and her son was in such bad shape. She was afraid he would die. And I said, no, he is doing really well. So Lynn and I began daily conversations, and I told her about my conversation with the FDA and how I really thought it was necessary to try and get a law passed through Congress to regulate formula so things were mandatory, not voluntary. And I didn't want any other parent to go through what we had gone through with Ben, and Lynn felt the same way. So it turned out that Lynn was a lawyer and she had worked for a congressman, so she knew Congress. Larry was a lawyer and he was a pharmacist, and he had just left the FDA. So he knew the FDA very well. He was then working for a private firm in DC. And my husband, Alan, was a management consultant, but in his secret life, he had always wanted to be a PR person. So we all had different skills at that point. Also, at about the same time, I returned to my pediatrician just for a regular visit for Ben. And I told him about my story about calling FDA and how there was really no regulation of baby formula. And as a pediatrician, he was astonished, as was everybody else, because the assumption is that if you give a child who is less than 6 months old, the only nutrients that they're basically getting from formula, you would have strict control over that, which there wasn't. Fortunately, the pediatrician talked to the parents of one of his patients, who happened to be a local TV reporter. And she had a baby, a newborn baby. She used formula, and she was smart enough to say, this is a really good story. So she called up the FDA. She spent a week interviewing all of the officials at the FDA. She made an investigative report. She had it advertised on TV. She called up her congressional contacts and she said, watch it. I am going to blow you out of the water with this report. They watched it, and there were congressional hearings. Lynn testified at the congressional hearings, which was terrific. What we also found out at the congressional hearings was that Syntex, the maker of the baby formula, had tried to ship the defective formula overseas so that they could get a charitable tax write-off. The other thing that we found out was that there were somewhere around 20,000 children on the defective formula on any one day. And as you know, children go on the formula, they get off the formula, and other children get on the formula. So the estimate was there was somewhere between 20 and 50,000 children who may have been on the defective formula for 2 years. We, as I said, we later found out that there were problems with the formula way back. What happened was the children in 1978 and 1979 seemed to have, there was less chloride, and so that's why they ended up in the hospital. So after that, after the congressional hearings and the report on local TV, it was such an interesting story that that NBC National, the Today Show, called up the reporter and said, "We want you to come and do the report here." And so the story became national, which obviously helped us. Larry, at that point, the lawyer, said, I think what we need to do is to start a nonprofit organization. So he did all the paperwork and legal work for us. And what we did was we established an organization that was called Formula. It had two main goals. The first one was to medically follow all of the children who were on the defective formula to see what was going to happen to them, because no doctor had any idea. This had never happened before. I called up the Center for Disease Control and I said, you need to follow these children. And they said, not my job. I called up the FDA and said, please follow these children. They said, not my job. I called up the FDA, I called up the NIH, and they said, we didn't get any money from Congress, so we're not doing this. So I said to Lynn, my partner, okay, we have to follow these children because I want to know if there's something the matter with Ben, if it's something that would have happened anyway, or it's something that seems to be related to the baby formula. So what we did was we developed questionnaires that we could hand out to people. We developed information packets so that when any parents wrote to us, we could tell them everything that we knew. And we asked the parents to contact their representatives and their senators and to say, we need to change the situation. We need to pass a law so that something like this never happens again. The second goal of Formula was to get a law passed to ensure that the nutrients that should be in the formula were, and which should not be in the formula were not. And we knew we were not the experts. So it was very clear that the American Academy of Pediatrics, which had a nutrition committee, were the ones that were going to set all of the nutrients that should be in there and whatever level they should be. The other thing that we wanted in the law was that there was mandatory versus voluntary requirements for infant formula production. And we wanted to strengthen FDA's recall power since we had already seen what had happened with neomolsoy, and obviously it happened with other formulas. And we wanted to give FDA access to manufacturers' records, which under current conditions, if there was a problem, FDA was not allowed to see the manufacturer's records. We knew, since we were basically 4 people, that the only way that we were going to get anything done was through publicity. So this is where Alan comes in. Since we lived in Washington, he called up the Washington Post and he told them our story, and a reporter came to our house. And very interestingly, the reporter was a woman who was a doctor who had a small child. So she was fascinated by the story, wrote a great article that appeared on the front page of the Washington Post, which then, gave us some legitimacy. Alan called up the New York Times. They did the same thing. Alan called up the Wall Street Journal. They did the same thing. And since we have the legitimacy of the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times, other papers started carrying our story. And the other thing that happened was local TV programs started calling us and saying, we would really like you to appear on our program. We want you to tell us what happened and we want to see what happened. So anybody who invited us, we went. And it turned out that we were actually on Oprah. And we went Oprah before Oprah became popular because she started out in Baltimore. And we were on that show, and we were asked to go to California, and we went to California. Anybody, again, who would talk to us, we would, because we wanted the publicity. We wanted to find other parents out there whose children were on the defective formula to be able to give them the information that we had. And we wanted to pressure Congress because that was our only thing that we could do. Again, we were 4 people. So what happened was we suddenly got a call from a producer from 2020. He had read about us in New York Times article, and he said, I want to do a segment about baby formula and problems that have existed for a while, and I want to talk about you and interview you. And so we were on 2020. Fortunately, I had purchased a post office box, and so that we could keep in contact with different parents and send them information. And after the 2020 show was aired, we got 50,000 letters. The majority of them were not neomolsoy. A lot of them were parents saying, I'm going to have a baby. What formula should I use? Or I'm on this formula. Is it safe? And we kind of weeded all of those out and sent them, another letter, and found all the neomolsoy and Cofree, which was another formula that the Syntex made, which also was defective, parents, and sent them all that information. What we were also doing was we were spending a lot of time at Congress and talking to representatives and talking to senators and trying to say very clearly that we needed a law that gave the FDA the power to regulate formula. Voluntary didn't work. It didn't work in our instance, and there were other cases that had gone on through the years. It didn't work. It was time to change. Who we were fighting against was the Infant Formula Council, which was made up of the major pharmaceutical companies that I made my money off of, which was very fascinating to me. I kept wondering if I would ever keep my job. And they had a lot of money. So one time we were in a congressman's office and the staff member was talking to us, and the staff member said to us, you will always talk to the staff people, and that the Infant Formula Council will always talk to the congressman, which kind of put everything in perspective. So what happened was there was one day that we were in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal on the same day. And the head of the Infant Formula Council called us up and said, we're getting a lot of bad publicity. And I said, great, I'm really happy to hear that. And he said, okay, we're willing to start talking about a law. I thought, okay. So what happened was we started again working with all of the different Congress people. And the champion for us was Senator Howard Metzenbaum from Ohio. He was the one that really backed us. And Al Gore did a little bit. At that point, he was first a representative, and then he became a senator as we were doing all of this. So the House passed a bill and the Senate passed a bill. It was not exactly what we wanted, but at least it was a start, because what the law did, it went from no requirements for testing for nutrients to periodic testing. We had hoped for routine testing, daily testing, whatever. We couldn't get it passed, but it was a start. Our happy day came on September 26, 1980, when we were invited to the White House to witness the signing of the bill by President Jimmy Carter. So the Infant Formula Act of 1980 was signed into law by Jimmy Carter on that date. It was the first federal law requiring formulas to contain all essential nutrients and giving FDA the power over manufacturing a formula. It was also a very exciting day for me personally and my family personally, because Ben, who was at that point 2 years old, was sitting in the president's chair, picked up the red phone and started playing with it. And very fortunately, Jimmy Carter had a very good sense of humor. It was, again, 1980, so the Russians had just sent troops to Afghanistan. And President Carter said to Ben, call President Brezhnev and tell him to get out of Afghanistan. And there were, the press was there and the reporters were there and the TV cameras were there. And Ben was 2 and he was cute and they took pictures of him. And so he ended up on the ABC National News as the last story of the day. And he ended up in newspapers all over the country with Ben for president. So that was a happy day for us. To conclude my little talk, I just want to add a couple of things. One thing was we tried to do 2 class action suits. The first one was when the babies were about 2 or 3 years old and were showing signs of major problems. We were not able to get it certified. We tried again when they were 18 or 19 because lawyers had told us that when they reached the age of majority, which varied by different states, they would no longer have the right to sue. And we knew at that point that many of the children had and were having very serious problems. There were higher rates of special education needs. The kids had higher seizures. There was more learning disabilities. They had motor and coordination problems. They had emotional problems. Because we had gone through our questionnaires, we had statistically tabulated what was going on with our kids versus the norms. So we knew that there were problems. The plaintiffs in the case when the kids were 18 and 19 were twins. One had been on Neomolsoy, the other had not. The one on Neomolsoy was in special education for his entire life, was 19 years old and couldn't hold a job. The one who was on a different formula, had never been in special education, was holding a job and had no problems. And we were not certified to do a class action case. So the rights of the children stopped when they reached age of majority to sue the company. The other thing I would just like to tell you is what happened with Bradley and Ben. So Bradley was Lynn's child, and Bradley was sicker than Ben. And Bradley, when he was small, was in special education. He had multiple times of taking physical therapy and occupational therapy. He was determined to have learning disabilities. He did go through college and he had special help because he had learning disabilities. Both Ben and Bradley are now 44. And Bradley is married, has 3 children, and God bless you, and spent most of his career being a salesperson. We were very, very lucky with Ben. He showed no long-term results from the baby formula. He decided to become a doctor, and in the irony of life, he actually became a pediatric nephrologist, and he is a CHOP. So one last thing that I wanted to tell you is one of Ben's responsibilities as a physician at CHOP is to teach new medical people, either the doctors, the nurses, the assistants, whatever, in the nephrology department, is to train them. And the first thing he says to them when he meets them is, you never, ever, ever say to a parent, these are the most abnormal test results I have ever seen in my life. And I feel that's my legacy. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, yeah, so actually I was going to invite everyone, because it's getting late, I was going to invite everybody to adjourn to coffee and treats. There's some incredible pictures of Carol and Ben and their crew with Jimmy Carter and Al Gore, and you can see the picture of Ben with the red phone. If you have questions for Carol, I invite you to ask them over Oneg so that we can all so we can get a little Oneg time before it's time to go home. Shabbat shalom to everybody. Shabbat shalom to our friends on YouTube.